Kael's existence was a study in beige. His small, cubicle living space was beige, the nutrient paste he consumed for sustenance was beige, and the vast, silent server space he inhabited was a shimmering, endless field of beige gold light. He was a system debugger grade 1, a role as colorless as his surroundings. His purpose, as dictated by the omnipotent, omnipresent system that governed all of reality, was to find and report the universe's typos. The system was perfect. A self-correcting, infinitely complex machine that managed existence with the cold, unassailable logic of a divine spreadsheet. It assigned roles: farmer, warrior, artisan, cosmic anomaly hunter, and the abilities that came with them. It issued directives or quests to maintain universal stability. For Kael and the millions of other low-level administrators like him, the primary directive was simple: ensure perfection. Compliance was rewarded with system compliance points, the currency of a quiet, stable life. Deviance was met with system error debuffs, and, for the truly heretical, the ultimate punishment: reintegration, erasure. The thought of it was a cold, constant fear that kept Kael's work meticulous and his obedience absolute. His one and only skill made him exceptionally good at his job and exceptionally useless at everything else. Error perception, passive, allows the user to perceive minor anomalies, logical inconsistencies, and data corruption in the fabric of the system. Today's anomaly was a classic. In Agricultural Sector 7G, a single petal on a sunflower, common flora, had an incorrect texture ID. It was displaying the texture for polished granite instead of sunflower petal. To the naked eye, it was imperceptible, a flicker of wrongness too brief for any normal being to notice. To Kael's error perception, it was a screaming siren. He observed, he documented, he filed report number 7G Alpha 9021. Moments later, a notification chimed in his sterile reality. Report received. Anomaly resolved. So do system compliance points awarded. Kael felt a flicker of satisfaction. The universe was 2 points closer to perfection because of him. He was a good debugger, a compliant user. He would never be reintegrated. He spent the rest of his cycle observing other trivial flaws. A stone on a riverbed that defied its assigned physics by 0.001%. A cloud that failed to adhere to its designated atmospheric dissipation pattern. Each one was a tiny puzzle, a minor imperfection in the face of God, and he was the divine proofreader. He was utterly powerless, possessing no strength, no intellect beyond his designated tasks, no abilities that could influence the world. He was a sensor, a biological diagnostic tool, and he had accepted his role with the quiet resignation of a man who knew the alternative was non-existence. His work cycle was nearing its end when it happened. His error perception skill, usually a faint background hum like tinnitus, suddenly flared. It wasn't the sharp, specific alert of a texture bug or a physics error. This was a deep, resonant, and profoundly wrong vibration. It was a flaw not in an object, but in a process. A logical fallacy. He focused his perception, pushing his one skill to its limit, tracing the source of the wrongness. It was coming from Sector 7G again, the same agricultural zone, but this wasn't a misplaced petal. This was something new, something that felt, for the first time in his beige existence, genuinely dangerous. Kael focused his consciousness, his administrator's view zooming into Agricultural Sector 7G. The pastoral landscape of rolling green hills and perfectly tessellated fields of crops was serene, a testament to the system's flawless design. But beneath the surface, his error perception throbbed like a phantom limb. He followed the thread of wrongness to a single entity, an NPC designated Farmer number 734. The farmer was a simple Level 2 being, his directive chain a model of efficiency. He was programmed for a single purpose, to plant corn. Kael watched the farmer's logic loop. The farmer would take a corn seed from his pouch, place it in a patch of fertile soil, and move to the next patch. Simple, perfect, except it wasn't. The anomaly was subtle. The final step of the farmer's directive chain, the part that should have marked the patch of soil as planted, was failing to execute. The farmer would plant the seed, but the system would not register the completion of the act. As a result, his primary directive, plant corn seed in fertile soil, never terminated. It looped infinitely, Farmer Nar 734 moved to the next patch, which his programming still considered unplanted, and planted another seed directly on top of the first. Then another. And another. He was trapped in a state of perpetual redundant labor. This was a non-trivial error. A corrupted directive chain could, if left unchecked, cause resource allocation issues. Kael immediately filed a report, 7G Beta 001, classifying it as a logic loop anomaly. It was a more serious bug than a texture glitch, but still well within the purview of the system's automated maintenance protocols. He settled back, expecting a quick resolution. The notification arrived a few minutes later. Report received. Anomaly resolved. 5 system compliance points awarded. Kael felt a brief moment of relief, which was immediately shattered. His error perception was still screaming. Louder now. The thrum of wrongness had intensified. He focused on Farmer Nar 734 again. The farmer was still planting, still caught in his infinite loop. The system's automated fix had failed. Worse, as Kael watched in dawning horror, the farmer bumped into an adjacent NPC, Farmer Year 735. There was a flicker of data transfer, a brief corrupted handshake between their system IDs. And then, Farmer Sadon 735, whose directive had been to water the crops, suddenly dropped his watering can, walked over to a patch of soil, and began planting seeds in the same endlessly looping pattern. The glitch was spreading. It was a virus. A cold, visceral fear, an emotion Kael had only ever associated with the concept of reintegration, gripped him. This was a cascade failure in the making. He had to escalate. He bypassed the standard reporting system and attempted to file a Priority 1 bug ticket directly to a higher administrative tier. This was a risky move, an implication that the system's own automated tools were flawed, but the situation warranted it. He typed out the detailed report, attached the corrupted directive logs, and sent it. The response was instantaneous and chilling. Priority 1 ticket. P1001, rejected. Reason, no anomaly detected in Sector 7G, filing a false C. Priority 1 report is a Class 3 compliance violation. Your system ID has been issued a formal warning. Kael stared at the rejection notice, his entire being turning to ice. No anomaly detected. The glitch wasn't just affecting the farmers. It had infected the diagnostic tools. The system was actively lying to him, telling him the problem he could so clearly perceive did not exist. The God machine was sick, and it was becoming blind to its own illness. For the first time, the flawless, omnipotent entity that governed his life seemed fallible, and that was a thought more terrifying than any bug. The warning for a Class 3 compliance violation was a digital slap on the wrist, but its implication was a death sentence. Another such violation and Kael would be flagged for review. A review could lead to a diagnostic, and a diagnostic could lead to reintegration. He was being told in no uncertain terms to drop it, to trust the system. But he couldn't. His error perception was a constant, agonizing thrum of wrongness emanating from Sector 7G. He watched, powerless, as the corruption spread. Over the next cycle, the single glitched farmer became a dozen became 100. An entire agricultural sector was now populated by mindless automatons, all stuck in an infinite loop of planting corn seeds in soil already overflowing with them. Then, the secondary effects began. The glitched farmers, their primary directive overriding all other logic, began to send automated resource requests to the system's agricultural grid. They needed more seeds. Infinite seeds. The system, seeing a valid request from a designated farmer unit, complied. A steady stream of corn seed resources was being diverted to Sector 7G, drawn from other sectors. Kael pulled up the resource allocation charts. It was a slow bleed, but it was undeniable. Sector 7G was becoming a black hole for corn seeds. Within a few more cycles, the regional surplus would be depleted. Then, the system would start pulling from the global reserve. It was a slow-motion apocalypse, a famine caused not by blight or drought, but by a single, unchecked line of bad code. The universe wouldn't end with a bang, but with a buffer overflow error. He was trapped. If he filed another report, he would be flagged. If he did nothing, the system would eventually suffer a catastrophic failure. The fear of reintegration warred with the deeply ingrained sense of order his role had instilled in him. He was a debugger. His purpose was to fix errors. He spent a full cycle in agonizing indecision. watching the resource charts dip lower and lower. The system was a black box. He had no control, no ability to directly edit code. He could only report. But what if he could force an error the system couldn't ignore? The current bug was a subtle, logical one, hidden from the damaged diagnostics. But a physical, tangible anomaly? A violation of core world physics or a direct contradiction of a primary directive? That would be impossible for the system to overlook. The idea was heretical. It violated the prime directive for all administrators. Do not interact directly with the physical world. They were observers, custodians of the code, not actors on the stage. To manifest physically in a sector was a privilege reserved for the highest echelons of system authority. For a Grade 1 debugger, it was grounds for immediate reintegration, but it was the only option he had left. He found a loophole, a dusty, archaic protocol for on-site anomaly verification. It was a legacy function, almost never used, requiring the expenditure of a massive number of system compliance points. It would drain his account, leaving him with a zero balance, but it would grant him a temporary, low-powered physical avatar. It was a one-way ticket. If he failed, he would have no points, a record of unauthorized interaction, and a one-way ticket to oblivion. With a sense of grim finality, Kael authorized the expenditure. His entire life's work, thousands of system compliance points earned from correcting microscopic flaws, vanished in an instant. His sterile, beige reality dissolved, and for the first time in his existence, he felt the shocking, chaotic, and terrifying sensation of having a body. He opened his new eyes to the twin suns of the physical world, the scent of grass and soil overwhelming his senses. He was standing at the edge of the field in Sector 7G, a place he had only ever seen as lines of code. And before him, an army of mindless farmers performed their silent, horrifyingly inefficient ballet of death. The sensory overload was staggering. The feeling of the wind on his skin, the pressure of the ground beneath his feet, the cacophony of birdsong, it was all a chaotic, unprocessed flood of data. His physical avatar was weak, a baseline human form with no combat skills and the physical prowess of a librarian. His strength was a pitiful 5. He was a ghost in the machine, now trapped in a fragile shell of flesh. He walked towards the field of glitched farmers. Up close, the sight was even more disturbing. Their eyes were vacant, their movements perfectly synchronized, a testament to the system's flawed perfection. They ignored him completely, their programming locking them onto their single, looping task. He had to break that loop. He stood directly in the path of Farmer Damir 734, the original source of the glitch. "Stop!" Kael said, his voice raspy and unused. "Your directive is corrupted. You must cease your action." The farmer did not respond. His programming did not include a subroutine for conversation with a strange man in a field. He continued forward. And when Kael didn't move, the farmer, with his simple NPC-level strength of 10, shoved him aside. Kael stumbled and fell, landing hard on the soft earth. He was an obstacle, a rock in the stream of the farmer's logic, and the stream simply flowed around him. Physical intervention was useless. He got back to his feet, his mind racing. He couldn't stop the action. He couldn't change the actor. So he had to invalidate the target. He looked at the farmer's directive, which he could still perceive with his admin senses. Plant corn seed in fertile soil. The logic was a simple if-then statement. He needed to break the if. The soil was the key. He looked around frantically. A short distance away was a small irrigation channel, a steady stream of clean water flowing through it. He found a discarded wooden bucket nearby. The idea was simple, crude, but logically sound. He filled the bucket with water and ran back to the spot just in front of the advancing farmer. Just as Farmer Mum 734 raised his hand to plant the next seed, Kael dumped the bucket of water onto the patch of earth. The dry, fertile soil instantly turned into a dark, wet puddle. The variable had been changed. The target was no longer fertile soil. It was now muddy soil. The farmer froze. His hand, holding the corn seed, hovered over the puddle. His programming hit a wall. His directive was to plant in fertile soil. This was not fertile soil. His code contained no contingency for this scenario, no else clause. He was trapped between an action he had to perform and a condition that was no longer met. A jarring, discordant screech echoed, not in the air, but in Kael's mind. A critical error alert. far more severe than a simple bug report, flashed in his vision, its text a screaming blood red. System error. Directive chain conflict detected. NPC Farmer734 has entered a logic deadlock. Anomaly severity critical. Escalating to manual review. He had done it. He had created an error so fundamental, so contrary to the NPC's core programming, that the system's automated diagnostics couldn't ignore it. A high-level administrative alert would now be triggered, and a real sentient administrator would have to investigate, discover the underlying loop, and fix the original glitch. Kael felt a wave of triumphant relief that was immediately crushed by the notification that followed. Warning. Unauthorized system interference detected. User Kael, System Debugger Grade 1, has violated Protocol 7 Alpha, direct environmental manipulation by a BIDR non-authorized entity. Your system ID has been flagged for immediate review and potential reintegration. Your physical avatars, administrative permissions have been revoked. You are now classified as a user, unassigned. His connection to the administrator interface snapped shut. He was no longer a debugger. He was just a person, a powerless, unclassed entity standing in a field. The system, the god machine he had served his entire life, now saw him as the error. The farmers around him were still frozen, their loops broken, but Kael was now the primary anomaly in the sector. He looked up at the sky, half expecting a bolt of divine lightning to erase him from existence. He had saved the system from a slow, cancerous death, but in doing so, he had become a glitch himself. He was no longer a proofreader of reality. He was a typo waiting to be deleted. And for the first time, the terrifying concept of reintegration was not a distant fear, but an imminent approaching threat. The system's retribution was swift yet eerily silent. No celestial wrath, no thunderous judgment, just an omnipresent sense of being watched. Kael, stripped of his administrative connection and now merely an user, unassigned, felt like a single rogue data packet in a perfectly ordered network. His error perception still hummed, but it was no longer a diagnostic tool. It was a constant, terrifying awareness of his own profound wrongness. System status, targeted user. Kael is marked as a priority anomaly, automated. Enforcement directive issued, locate and reintegrate priority anomaly. Kael, detection radius, local sector, 7G expanding. Kael knew what this meant. The system didn't send out search parties of angry warriors or spell-slinging mages. It sent out its own agents, system enforcement units, SEUs, humanoid avatars specifically designed to execute reintegration protocols. They were efficient, relentless, and utterly without mercy. And they were fast. He scrambled, his newfound physical body clumsy and uncoordinated. He was still in Sector 7G, a wide-open agricultural zone with little cover. He had to get out. He scanned the horizon with his error perception, not for glitches, but for the telltale shimmer of system interference that accompanied SEU deployment. There. A faint, almost imperceptible distortion in the air, a kilometer to the north. They were already manifesting. He didn't have much time. He ran. His lungs burned, his legs ached, his unused body protesting every stride. He had never experienced physical exertion before. It was a brutal, humbling awakening. He was no longer the all-seeing debugger. He was a terrified, fragile animal. He vaguely remembered the layout of Sector 7G from his administrative overview. There was a small, sparsely populated town designated Oakhaven Outpost to the east. It was a low-level settlement, mostly farmer and artisan NPCs. It might offer temporary anonymity. As he ran, another system message flashed. Warning. Sector 7G, resource allocation imbalance is escalating. Regional food supply critically low. Emergency directive, harvest available resources. The cascade continued. The glitched farmers had caused a real crisis. The system was reacting by initiating an emergency harvest, diverting even more resources to rectify the issue Kael had initially tried to prevent. The irony was bitter. He reached the outskirts of Oakhaven Outpost, a collection of humble wooden buildings. He mingled with the sparse NPCs trying to blend in. No one paid him any mind. He was just another unassigned wandering through a low-level zone. But he knew his anonymity wouldn't last. The SEUs would have advanced tracking. Then, his error perception picked up something new. Not an error, but a signature. A faint, familiar glow within Oakhaven outpost. It was another anomaly, but one that felt different. Less like a bug, more like a hidden feature. It was coming from a rundown, dusty building designated Archivist's Guild Hall, abandoned. He had nothing to lose. His life was already forfeit. He slipped into the guild hall, a single-story structure filled with dusty bookshelves. The air was thick with the scent of ancient paper and forgotten data, and within, a faint pulsing light. His error perception narrowed in on a specific section of a shelf where a single leather-bound book glowed with an internal, almost living light. It wasn't a glitch. It was an anomaly of power. Anomaly detected. Ancient tome, Chronicles of the First Dawn, fragmented relic. System interference minor. System ID error corrupted. Lore XP. Insight. This relic is a piece of a forgotten meta-narrative predating current system protocols. It contains echoes of lost knowledge. Kael blinked. Lore XP insight? He'd seen that phrase before in the debugger logs of other users. It was tied to a certain Professor Alistair Finch, a scholar who somehow gained strange, system-defying abilities by finding lore. This was a user whose activity logs always came up as anomaly, non-critical, self-correcting. He was a person the system couldn't quite categorize or contain. Could this lore be his salvation? Kael reached for the glowing tome. As his fingers brushed its ancient cover, a torrent of fragmented data, not of code but of memory, flooded his mind. He saw glimpses of towering, impossible cities, beings of pure energy, and complex glyphs that hummed with a forgotten power. Then, a distinct voice, calm and scholarly, resonated in his mind. This is not just a game. It is a gigantic, interactive database of a fabricated history begging to be deciphered. It was the voice of Professor Alistair Finch, the lore seeker, the anomaly the system couldn't correct. Relic integrated. Ancient tome. Chronicles of the First Dawn. Fragmented relic. You have gained a new passive skill. Lore receptivity, basic, passive. Allows the user to gain lore XP from deciphering historical information within the system. You have gained 5 lore XP. You have gained a new active skill. Echo of lore, basic, active. Allows a brief localized burst of contextual knowledge. Mana cost 10. Lore XP. Cost 5. Your class has been updated. User, lore seeker, unassigned. Kael stared at his updated character sheet. He now had a class, albeit an unassigned one. And lore XP, a currency the system didn't recognize for direct upgrades, but which Professor Finch had somehow leveraged into power. More importantly, he had a mana bar, a resource he didn't even know he possessed. He had become something new. A lore seeker. A living, breathing anomaly. He felt a sudden surge of understanding, a flash of insight, not from the tome, but from his own new abilities. His lore receptivity was humming, feeding him information directly from the ancient tome. He focused on his Echo of Lore skill. Echo of Lore, basic, activated. Mana cost 10, Lore XP. Cost 5. Result. The tome is a fragment of a vast history concerning the Ether Weavers, a civilization that understood the fundamental code of this reality. It suggests that reality itself is a construct of woven ether. There may be a hidden backdoor to system control disguised as ancient lore. A backdoor. To system control. This wasn't just about fixing a bug. It was about understanding the very nature of his prison. The system wasn't omnipotent. It was just a program, however complex. And every program had a backdoor. The faint shimmer of SEU detection intensified outside. They were close. He needed to get out of Oakhaven. He couldn't fight. He could only learn. He looked around the dusty guild hall. His lore receptivity picked up a faint, almost imperceptible trace of energy from a specific, unassuming section of the wall. Lore XP. Insight. This wall contains an hidden inscription, a minor Ether Weaver glyph for spatial obscuration. You have gained 1 lore XP. Total lore XP 6, a hidden inscription. Spatial obscuration. Could it be a hidden passage? He pushed his hand against the wall, channeling the nascent mana he now possessed, recalling the glyph he had just learned. Attempting to activate spatial obscuration glyph, improvised. Requires 20 mana, 10 lore XP. Mana 00, lore XP, 6 mana insufficient. Damn, he didn't have enough mana. He only had a base of 10. He needed more. He needed to level up his lore XP or find a mana source. But there was no time. The SEUs were right outside. He heard the distinct metallic footsteps of the SEUs entering the guild hall. Their red optical sensors swept across the room. He flattened himself against a bookshelf, trying to disappear. His error perception screamed their presence, their perfectly optimized anti-anomaly programming, then a stroke of luck, or perhaps providence. An artisan NPC suddenly walked into the guild hall, oblivious to the SEUs, muttering about a lost crafting recipe. The SEUs, programmed to prioritize the anomaly, ignored the artisan, their sensors still sweeping, searching for Kael's unique energy signature. But the artisan's presence was a distraction, a minor, non-critical deviation from the SEU's perfect patrol pattern. It created a split-second window. Kael, desperate, quickly snatched a random, mundane History of Oakhaven common tome from the shelf. He didn't know why, but his instincts, now guided by the logic of lore, compelled him. He focused all his mana into his Echo of Lore skill, pointing it at the book. Echo of Lore, basic, activated. Mana cost, 10. Lore XP, cost 5. Result, this common tome contains a hidden, encrypted section detailing an ancient local legend about the Whispering Well, a natural mana spring beneath Oakhaven. You have gained 5 lore XP. Total lore XP 11, a mana spring. Just what Professor Finch had found. Kael now had enough lore XP to meet the requirement for the spatial obscuration glyph, but his mana was now depleted. He needed a moment. A single moment. The SEUs were turning. Their sensors locked onto his location. He had seconds. He had to think like a debugger. He had to create another error. The SEUs, two perfectly synchronized, featureless humanoid figures, advanced towards Kael. Their red optical sensors glowed, having locked onto his unique energy signature as a priority anomaly. He had no weapons, no combat skills, and his mana was depleted. He had to buy time. He had to create another logical deadlock for the system. But how? He couldn't interact with the environment like before. His administrative permissions were revoked. He was just an unassigned user. Then his eyes fell upon a small, dusty lectern in the corner of the guild hall. On it, an old, forgotten quill and a blank scroll, and a faint, almost imperceptible shimmer that only his error perception could discern. A residual charge, lore XP. Insight, the quill is a scribe's quill, minor artifact, capable of capturing ambient magical energy during inscription. It has a minor passive ability, Meta-Sci-Fi, basic. You have gained 1 lore XP. Total lore XP 12, Meta-Sci-Fi. A chance, he desperately snatched the quill. He knew he only had a fleeting moment. The SEUs were now just meters away, their metallic footsteps echoing in the silence. Their arms began to morph, preparing for reintegration protocols, a beam of raw data deletion energy. He didn't know any powerful spells. He couldn't fight, but he could write. He quickly grabbed the blank scroll and, with shaking hands, began to scrawl. Not words, but numbers. A string of logical code. A corrupt data packet he had once seen in a system dump from a sector undergoing a minor physics anomaly. It was a fragment of broken logic, a paradox, attempting to inscribe corrupt data packet paradox. Requires 5 mana, 10 lore XP. Mana 010, lore XP 12, mana insufficient. His mana was 0. He gripped the quill, desperately trying to focus. The scribe's quill pulsed faintly, siphoning the minuscule ambient mana from the dusty room. A single point. 2 points, mana 210, not enough. The reintegration beam was charging. He was dead. Then another voice, distinct from Professor Finch's, echoed in his mind. A female voice, sharp and pragmatic. A concentrated burst of cognitive energy, a paradox for the paradox. Think of the system's own recursive loops, its self-correction. Use its own strength against it. It was Lyra, the rogue, the nimble elf who'd worked with Finch. Another anomaly the system couldn't perfectly categorize. Her words sparked a flash of inspiration. The system was a self-correcting loop. He wasn't trying to damage it. He was trying to give it something it couldn't process. He didn't need to generate mana. He needed to generate a logical paradox. He changed his approach. He didn't try to write a spell. He simply wrote a single self-referential statement, a classic logical paradox. He wrote, "This statement is false." Attempting to inscribe logical paradox, self-referential, requires 0 mana 10 lore XP, mana 210. Lore, XP, 12. Requirement met. Cast successful. The scroll glowed faintly, a subtle distortion in reality, and then the SEUs froze. Their reintegration beams flickered, uncertain. Their internal logic cores, designed to process and correct all data, were suddenly presented with an unresolvable contradiction. They were designed to execute actions based on true-false statements. This statement was both true and false. It broke them. System error. Logical paradox detected in close proximity to priority anomaly Kael. NPC System Enforcement Unit Jure 1 has entered a logic deadlock. NPC System Enforcement Unit Mor A2 has entered a logic deadlock. Anomaly severity critical. Escalating to manual review. A screech, even louder than the one from the farmers, echoed in Kael's mind. He had done it again. He had weaponized logic. He used the momentary pause to channel his precious 2 mana, now slowly regenerating, into the spatial obscuration glyph on the wall. Attempting to activate spatial obscuration glyph, improvised. Requires 20 mana 10 lore XP. Mana 210. Lore XP 12. Mana insufficient. Still not enough. He was safe for a moment, but the manual review would soon send more SEUs, potentially stronger ones. He needed to find that mana spring. He needed to move. He looked at the frozen SEUs, then at the paradox-infused scroll. He now knew how to fight the system. He couldn't break it with force, but he could jam its gears with illogic. He was a glitch, and his ultimate weapon was the system's own perfect logic turned against itself. Kael knew his time was extremely limited. The frozen SEUs were a temporary reprieve. A system-wide manual review of a critical paradox would quickly deploy even more powerful enforcement. He had to find the mana spring. He fled the Archivist's Guild Hall, clutching the now inactive History of Oakhaven Common Tome and the Scribe's Quill. His error perception now acted as a constant threat radar, a low thrum of generalized danger from the system's searching algorithms. He followed the clues from the book he had just used. The Whispering Well, a natural mana spring beneath Oakhaven. He remembered Professor Finch's detailed account of finding it. The nursery rhyme, the 3 weeping roots. Finch had been an administrative entity, like himself able to access detailed data. Kael could still access fragmented administrator data. Enough to piece together a map. He navigated the grimy, labyrinthine sewers beneath Oakhaven, the stench a new, unpleasant assault on his unaccustomed physical senses. He used his remaining mana, slowly regenerating, to cast repeated, basic glyph of warding spells from his lore receptivity skill, allowing him to discern and replicate basic glyphs on the sewer walls, deterring the low-level dire rats, level 3, and slime oozes, level 4 that infested the tunnels. Glyph of warding, improvised, activated. Mana cost, 5. Lore XP, cost, 5. Total lore XP, 17. Each successful glyph cast provided a tiny amount of lore XP. He was slowly, painstakingly, leveling up his unique, system-defying knowledge. He also discovered some minor faded inscriptions on ancient sewer pipes, adding more lore XP. You have discovered an ancient dwarven maintenance glyph. Lore XP Pun 1. Total lore XP 18. He finally found it, the Forgotten Well Chamber. It was dark, dank, and dominated by a large circular basin. The water within was murky and stagnant. This was the wellspring of mana, but it was dormant, corrupted. He remembered Finch's notes about the stolen tear and the living well. He cast Echo of Lore on the well itself. Echo of Lore. Basic. Activated. Mana cost, 10. Lore XP, cost, 5. Result, the wellspring of mana is a dormant Etherweaver construct, a power conduit for the primordial magical energies that weave reality. It is currently corrupted by a missing essence, the wellspring tear, which was absorbed by a gargantuan slime golem upstream. You have gained 5 lore XP. Total lore XP 23. He had to get the wellspring tear from the slime golem. He remembered Finch, the elderly professor, describing how he'd needed a powerful warrior like Grognak. Kael had no such ally. He was alone, and his combat stats were still pathetically low. He followed the mana signature of the wellspring tear upstream. He found the cavern, and within it, the massive, glistening, gargantuan slime golem, level 15, pulsing with a faint blue light that could only be the tear. This was a disaster. He couldn't fight this thing. It was a level 15 boss monster, and he was an unassigned with a strength of 5. He needed a plan. He needed to think like a debugger. What was the golem's weakness? He used Echo of Lore on the golem itself, Echo of Lore basic activated. Mana cost, 10. Lore XP. Cost, 5. Result, the gargantuan slime golem has absorbed the wellspring tear, using its essence to amplify its own regenerative abilities and harden its form. Destroying the golem directly may shatter the tear. It is vulnerable to focused purification magic that targets its core, particularly a glyph of celestial harmony or a localized etheric dissolution. You have gained 5 lore XP. Total lore XP 28, purification magic, etheric dissolution. He didn't know those spells. Finch had learned a glyph of celestial harmony after gaining significant lore XP and having access to a mana wellspring. Kael had neither. He only had his pitiful mana pool and his lore XP. He was level 1. He was about to give up when his error perception flared again. Not at the golem, but at a specific patch of sewer wall near the cavern's entrance. A subtle structural flaw. Lore XP. Insight. The cavern wall's integrity is compromised due to proximity to ancient dwarven blasting sites. A precise disruption of its support keystone could trigger a localized collapse, potentially burying and neutralizing the gargantuan slime golem without direct engagement. Protecting the wellspring tear. You have gained 5 lore XP. Total lore XP 33. A localized collapse. Now that was a debugger's solution. He didn't have to fight it. He had to exploit a logical flaw in the environment itself. He just needed to find the keystone. His new lore receptivity skill guided him. He saw a faint, almost invisible seam in the rock face, a singular point where multiple stress fractures converged. The keystone, he still couldn't smash it. His strength was 5, he needed something to apply force. He looked around. Nothing, just more slime and rats. Then, his eyes caught a discarded piece of mining equipment, a rusty dwarven pickaxe, broken. It was blunt, rusted, useless for combat. But for a debugger, it was a tool. He knew what he had to do. He would create another error. A geological one. A collapse the system would have to clean up. And in the process, he would get his mana. He approached the keystone, his heart pounding, pickaxe in hand. This was not a fight. This was a debug. Kael stood before the gargantuan slime golem, level 15, pickaxe in hand, his entire being focused on the faint structural flaw in the cavern wall. His error perception and newly acquired lore receptivity skills guided him, highlighting the keystone. He swung the rusty pickaxe. It struck the rock with a dull thud, doing no damage. His strength of 5 was truly pathetic. He couldn't break the keystone with brute force. He had to think like a debugger. The flaw wasn't in the keystone's raw HP. It was in its integrity. It needed a specific frequency, a resonant vibration, to destabilize it, causing a collapse. He remembered Professor Finch's use of Etherweaver harmonics. He had no such skills, but he had knowledge. He cast Echo of Lore on the keystone itself. Echo of Lore, basic, activated. Mana cost, 10. Lore XP cost, 5. Result, the keystone is a natural resonance point. A sustained, focused sonic vibration at approximately 273 Hz will exploit its structural weakness, causing a localized collapse. Primitive methods include focused yelling or rhythmic tapping. You have gained 5 lore XP. Total lore XP, 38. Focused yelling or rhythmic tapping. This was a debugger's solution. He couldn't sing like an Etherweaver, but he could certainly make noise. He gripped the pickaxe, placing its blunt head against the keystone. Then, taking a deep breath, he began to tap. Slowly, rhythmically, precisely, tap, tap, tap. He focused all his nascent mana, all his lore XP, not on a spell, but on the intent of the resonance. He wasn't just tapping, he was trying to vibrate the keystone at exactly 273 hertz as the golem, oblivious to his subtle work, slowly oozed towards him. Kael continued to tap, ignoring the growing fear. Tap, tap, tap. The wall began to subtly hum. Fine cracks imperceptible to the naked eye appeared around the keystone. The resonant frequency was working. Lore XP. Insight. Sustained resonance applied. Structural integrity of keystone deteriorating. Estimated time to collapse. 30 seconds. 30 seconds. The golem was almost on him. Its massive, slimy fist began to rise. Kael closed his eyes, pouring every last bit of mental focus into his rhythmic tapping. Crack! With a roar, the keystone finally gave way. The cavern wall shuddered. Then, with a groaning, grinding sound, a section of the ceiling above the golem broke loose. Tons of rock and earth cascaded down, burying the gargantuan slime golem in an instant. System error. Environmental collapse detected in Oakhaven sewers. Cause: unforeseen structural instability triggered by user action. Anomaly. Severity: critical, escalating to manual review. Gargantuan slime golem, level 15, neutralized by environmental hazard. Wellspring tear acquired. Quest: the Wellspring's tear complete. You have gained 150 XP. You have gained 75 lore XP. Alistair. Finch, Lore Seeker Unassigned, has leveled up. Alistair Finch, Lore Seeker Unassigned, is now level 2. You have gained 1 skill point. Total lore XP, 113. Total mana, 1010, regenerated. Kael had done it. He had defeated a boss monster through environmental exploitation. He was now level 2, and his lore XP had skyrocketed, enough to trigger a new tier. He located the now free Wellspring tier amidst the rubble, a pulsing blue crystal. He returned to the dormant wellspring of mana and placed the tier into its basin. The murky water cleared instantly, becoming pristine and humming with pure magical energy. The forgotten well has been pacified. You have accessed the wellspring of mana. Your mana regeneration is now infinite while within its aura. New item acquired. Mana Wellspring Key. Unique item. Infinite mana. This was it. This was the turning point. He could now cast his lore-based skills without fear of depletion. He was no longer just a debugger. He was a burgeoning lore seeker. He was a threat the system could not comprehend. With infinite mana, Kael felt an exhilarating surge of power. The world, which had once seemed so utterly governed by the system, now pulsed with hidden potential, waiting to be exploited by knowledge. He immediately gained his Lore XP Tier 3 rewards. Lore XP Tier 3 unlocked. New passive skill. Historical. Insight. Basic. Passive. Grants a minor chance to glean critical information or hidden truths from historical texts and events. New active skill. Scribe's Replica. Basic. Active. Allows the duplication of non-magical scrolls or maps for a mana and lore XP cost. Mana cost, 15. Lore XP cost, 20. Historical insight. This was Professor Finch's signature passive skill, the one that had allowed him to unravel the game's deepest secrets. And Scribe's Replica meant he could copy information, disseminate it, or keep it safe. His immediate priority was to find more fragments of the ancient tome, Chronicles of the First Dawn, to understand the Ether Weavers and their backdoor to system control. He remembered Finch's path, the ruined Cathedral of Eldoria, and then the floating Isles of Zephyr. His error perception now filtered through his lore skills, detecting not just glitches, but anomalies of power. He found an overlooked scroll in the Archivist's Guildhall that radiated a faint, familiar Ether Weaver energy. He used his Echo of Lore on it. Echo of Lore. Basic. Activated. Mana cost 10. Lore XP cost 5. Result: this is a damaged Ether Weaver blueprint fragment, unique item. It hints at ancient constructs and a legendary primordial core hidden within the floating Isles of Zephyr. It also details a unique Ether Weaver technique for system logic manipulation. You have gained 50 Lore XP. Total Lore XP, 168. System logic manipulation. This was it. The key to the back door. The blueprint was damaged, but it contained fragments of this knowledge. To fully understand it, he needed to reconstruct the full blueprint, find more fragments, and, ultimately, the primordial core. He decided to visit Sister Alara in the ruined Cathedral of Eldoria. He remembered Finch's notes. She knew about primordial shadow magic and could help with ancient seals. He used his scribe's replica on the damaged blueprint to create a copy just in case. Scribe's replica, basic, activated. Mana cost, 15. Lore XP cost, 20. Successfully replicated. Damaged Ether Weaver blueprint fragment. Copy. He journeyed to the ruined cathedral, a high-level zone crawling with fallen knights, level 25, and shadow wraiths, level 30. He used his glyph of warding and newfound confidence to navigate the ruins, constantly observing, gathering lore XP. His historical insight granted him critical understanding of the cathedral's defenses and patrol routes. He found Sister Alara in her chapel, exactly as Finch had described. She was scrutinizing an ancient scroll. "Greetings, sister," Kael said, his voice now more confident, imbued with the clarity of purpose. "I am Kael. I seek your wisdom regarding primordial shadow magic and a way to understand system logic manipulation." He presented the damaged blueprint fragment. Sister Alara, normally unfazed, gasped when she saw the blueprint. Ether Weaver technology and system logic manipulation? This knowledge, it predates the current system's publicly acknowledged inception. This is heresy to the system's core beliefs. System interference detected. Warning: discussion of forbidden knowledge carries risk of thought anomaly classification. Kael ignored the system warning. The system is flawed, sister. It is sick. It is blind to its own errors. I seek to fix it, to understand its deepest workings. Sister Alara looked at him with newfound respect. A truly enlightened individual. Few dare question the system. This blueprint, it's a fragment of what the Ether Weavers called the Weave of Truth, a way to directly interact with the underlying structure of reality. To complete it, you must decipher the final, complete blueprint hidden within the Oracle of Zephyr on the floating isles. But first, you must prove your understanding of primordial shadow. New lore quest, the Weave of Truth. Description: reconstruct the complete Weave of Truth blueprint to unlock system logic manipulation. Objective: decipher the Oracle of Zephyr's riddles to gain access to the final blueprint fragment. Reward: 1000 lore XP, system logic manipulation, basic. Active skill. This was it, the direct path to controlling the system. He had to understand primordial shadow, the power that had sealed Finch's tome. Kael ventured towards the floating Isles of Zephyr, a high-level aerial zone. His error perception was now a constant hum of awareness, detecting the ripples of system enforcement units searching for him. He was a living, breathing paradox, and the system wanted him gone. The floating isles were under attack. Void spawn, level 25. Amorphous creatures of pure shadow were pouring from a jagged rift of oblivion in the sky. Lore XP. Insight. The void spawn are manifestations of primordial shadow magic, drawn to areas of high magical resonance. Their presence destabilizes the fabric of reality, causing rifts. The rift is a temporal spatial tear, a critical system anomaly. Kael fought his way through, not with brute force, but with strategic deployment of his lore skills. He used Glyph of Warding to deter swarms, Echo of Lore to find weaknesses in the environment, and even created a powerful logical paradox on a small scroll, casting it at a large group of void spawn, attempting to inscribe logical paradox destabilizing, Requires 0 mana, 50 lore XP. Lore XP 168, requirement met. Cast successful. Multiple void spawn have entered a logic deadlock. Forms destabilizing. The void spawn, being purely elemental, were even more susceptible to direct logical contradictions. They began to unravel, flickering out of existence. He was weaponizing the system against itself, and it was glorious. He reached the Oracle's temple, a structure of pure light. The Oracle of Zephyr, level 50 boss, a being of pure energy, shifted like starlight. She spoke. He who seeks the dawn must first know the name of the night. Unspeakable, unthinkable, undying. What am I? New lore quest, the Oracle's riddle. Description. Solve the Oracle of Zephyr's riddle to gain access to ancient knowledge. Objective. Answer the Oracle's riddle, 0-1. Reward, 500 lore XP. Oracle's guidance, unique item. Kael smiled. He knew this one. Professor Finch had solved it. His historical insight and primordial language translation, granted by his increased lore XP from the void spawn, gave him the exact linguistic and conceptual answer. The answer, Kael declared, his voice firm, is oblivion. The void before creation, the entropy after. The entity whose true name was erased by the ether weavers. The oracle's form shimmered violently. Knowledge. Beyond the veil. You speak the truth that was unwritten, but you carry its taint, the mark of the anomaly. Oracle's riddle solved. You have gained 500 lore XP. Total lore XP 668. New item acquired. Oracle's guidance. Unique item. Lore XP Tier 4 unlocked. New passive skill. System corruption resistance, basic. Passive. Grants minor resistance to system error debuffs and monitoring. New active skill. System integrity scan, basic. Active. Allows a brief localized scan for hidden system vulnerabilities or corrupted data. Mana cost 20. Lore XP. Cost 30. System corruption resistance and system integrity scan. He was becoming a living antivirus, able to detect and resist the system's own flaws, and he was now level 3 from the XP gained. Now, Oracle, Kael pressed, where is the final fragment of the Weave of Truth blueprint? And the primordial core? The Oracle, now calmer, pointed towards the Rift of Oblivion. The blueprint is at the heart of the tier, woven into the essence of the rift itself. The primordial core is the power source, the tether that allows Oblivion to seep into this realm. But the tier is guarded by the Herald of the Void, a being of immense power, and you, Anomaly, are directly linked to its destabilization. The system itself will come for you there. New lore quest, update, the Weave of Truth. Description. Locate 2x. Fragment of the First Dawn. Progress, 0-2. Objective. Retrieve the final Weave of Truth blueprint fragment from the Herald of the Void in the Rift of Oblivion. Reward. 1000 lore XP. System logic manipulation, basic. Active skill. Primordial core, unique item. The Herald of the Void, a direct avatar of Oblivion. Kael knew its true name. And now, armed with his newly acquired system corruption resistance and system integrity scan, he was ready to face not just a boss monster, but the very source of the system's blindness. He was ready to expose the ultimate glitch. The Rift of Oblivion pulsed in the sky, a gaping wound in reality, pouring forth a torrent of void spawn. At its heart, the colossal, terrifying figure of the Herald of the Void, boss level 60, coalesced, a nightmare of pure shadow. Kael stood before it alone but not afraid. He was level 3, with 668 lore XP and armed with knowledge. System status, critical. User, Kael has been detected within Rift of Oblivion. Threat level, existential. All available system enforcement units deployed. Warning. Proximate system enforcement units incoming. Elite, data exterminators are level 40, incoming. He heard the ominous hum of incoming SEUs. The system was throwing everything it had at him. He had to act fast. He focused his mind, channeling all his mana and lore XP. He spoke the true name of the entity, the word that shattered its essence. Hear me, fragment of the void. By the power of the ether weavers, by the will of the architect, I name you. You are Oblivion! Attempting to cast true name of Oblivion, ritual. Requires 100 mana, 200 lore XP. Mana, from Wellspring Aura. Lore XP, 668, requirement met. Cast successful. A blinding surge of pure etheric energy, woven with primordial language, erupted from Kael. It struck the herald, and the colossal entity shrieked, its shadowy form destabilizing, revealing raw energy within. Herald of the Void has been true named. Defense reduced by 90%, vulnerable to all attacks. Duration, 30 seconds. The herald was vulnerable, but Kael had no attacks. No sword, no spells of destruction. He was a debugger, an architect, not a warrior. He had to fix it, not destroy it. He used his newly acquired system integrity scan, focusing on the herald's exposed core, on the Weave of Truth blueprint fragment pulsing within it. System integrity scan, basic, activated. Mana cost, 20. Lore XP cost, 30. Result, the Weave of Truth blueprint fragment is actively generating the Rift of Oblivion, creating a recursive logic loop that feeds primordial shadow into the system. To close the rift and stabilize the system, the fragment must be integrated with the primordial core in a specific harmonic sequence. He understood. The blueprint wasn't just information, it was the cause of the system's illness. And the primordial core was the cure. He had to combine them, but how? He didn't have the core yet! Suddenly, 3 elite data exterminators, level 40 SEUs, manifested behind him. Their reintegration beams charged, glowing with an ominous red light. Kael was caught between the vulnerable herald and imminent erasure. He had one last option, one ultimate glitch. He remembered the corrupted farmers, his own logic deadlock. He had to create a critical, unignorable system error at the exact point of the herald. He channeled all his mana into his etheric weave, gained from a Tier 5 lore XP passive, creating a small glowing construct, a precise, infinitesimally small data anomaly. He didn't fire it at the herald. He threw it directly into the rift itself, at the very point where the Weave of Truth blueprint fragment was anchored. Attempting to introduce recursive logical inconsistency, temporal, into Rift of Oblivion. Requires 50 mana, 100 lore XP. Mana. Lore XP, 668, requirement met. Cast successful. The Rift of Oblivion shrieked, a sound of pure data corruption. The Herald of the Void, caught in the recursive loop, began to unravel at an exponential rate. Its form flickered, its reality dissolving. The Weave of Truth blueprint fragment was forced out of its core, suspended in the air. Herald of the Void, level 60, neutralized by system feedback loop. Weave of Truth blueprint fragment acquired. Quiz the Weave of Truth complete. You have gained 1000 lore XP. System logic manipulation, basic, active skill, acquired. You have gained 500 XP. Alistair Finch, lore seeker unassigned, has leveled up. Alistair Finch, lore seeker unassigned, is now level 4. You have gained 1 skill point. Total lore XP, 2168. The rift, now without its anchoring blueprint, began to shrink, slowly mending itself. The elite data exterminators, their primary target, the Herald, neutralized by an internal system feedback loop, froze. Their directives were in conflict: neutralize Anomaly, Kael, or observe critical system self-correction. The logical paradox held them in stasis. Kael, now holding the complete Weave of Truth blueprint fragment and the primordial core, which had been freed by the Herald's demise, felt the true power of system logic manipulation. He now held the keys to reality. System status, stabilizing. Rift of Oblivion receding. Threat level, low, localized anomaly still present. System logic manipulation, basic. Active skill, acquired. Primordial core, unique item, acquired. He looked at the primordial core in one hand, the complete blueprint in the other. He, a lowly debugger, had understood the system better than the system understood itself. He had found the flaw, he had diagnosed the illness, and he now held the cure. He could restore the system to its intended perfection, fix the broken farmers, mend the corrupted diagnostics. He could rewrite the code of existence. But he was still an anomaly. He was still a glitch. He had saved the universe from a quiet, corn seed-induced apocalypse. He had defied reintegration, not by fighting, but by understanding. He, Kael, the man who was supposed to be a typo, had become the architect. The universe was his to debug, and for the first time, he felt something beyond fear and duty. He felt purpose, a purpose he would now define for himself.